Hey, I'm Crystal X. You are listening to MSP Sound on KFAI, and I'm so excited I have the talented local artist Gaelynn Lea with me via Zoom. Hey,
Hey, thanks for having me on.
absolutely. It's such a pleasure to get to meet you, and I'm such a fan of your music. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I do love KFAI, so thanks for making more time to chat with me today.
Well, we love to hear that. And so here we are. It is May 2021,
Yep.
and how have you been? How have you been?
That's such a loaded question these days. I've been pretty good actually. So the last year was really different than everybody expected and really difficult in a lot of ways. But we were lucky in that, we have a little apartment, my husband and I, sitting in the kitchen of it right now, and like a nice little place to live. And I was able to do a lot of stuff virtually this year. Kind of took the learning curve to a whole new level that I never expected, and then um, kind of created a whole new series of music shows, and those have been really fun and just kind of going with the flow. And now we're finally vaccinated too, so life can gradually open up a little bit more here, this summer. So we're in a pretty good spot actually. So considering how ridiculous this last year was, yeah, I feel like we're doing pretty good. I don't know.
That's good. That's really good. And
Yeah.
yeah, one of the things that came up during COVID was you started Sunday sessions on it's on just YouTube, right?
Yep. Just on YouTube. Yeah, that was like kind of, right on the way out to a tour is when they shut down the country. So we were heading out to Colorado. We had to cancel all the shows last minute, like, the day of the first show or whatever. And so it's the first one started kind of as just a, well, we're canceling the tour, let's do some shows. But then people kept saying, well, are you going to do this next week? Are you going to do this next week? And then I figured it would be a good way to stay connected with music. So when I first started the Sunday sessions, they were pretty much just me playing and sometimes improvising music by myself. But obviously, eventually, you're like, well, I don't want to do a show every single week that feels the same. So I started inviting friends. Took a while to figure out the technology part of that to make it look and sound good. I went through many iterations of like half botched attempts or whatever, and then finally figured out how to use OBS and Zoom to put it out over YouTube, and it sounds like real music now. It sounds good. The audio works, and yeah. So I started having special guests back in August, and I have them booked out through December. So the show's not going anywhere actually. Um, so it's really fun. I mean, it's not something like I play a little bit at the end. So there's a few of my own tunes. Every week, but a lot of it's with like talking to other artists and having them either play their own music or talk about their paintings or their poetry or whatever it is that they're bringing to share. And so the variety has been really fun for me to kind of get to in the heads of other artists, and people seem to enjoy watching them too. So it's been really fun.
Wow, that's really exciting. Talk about taking some lemons and making it into lemonade. Just
Yeah.
how do I keep in contact? How do I keep my music up? Can I keep people connected and coming here every week? And how fun. I mean, I know you and a couple other artists have started doing kind of a weekly show, which what a great idea. I mean, I'm sure this past year has not been good for musicians, and uh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like we've been fortunate. I was able to get a couple of grants to help with the show, which, ultimately kept us afloat too, and I have that Patreon that I have. So we're okay, but it was just kind of like, well, what are we going to do now? And I had a feeling early on that it was going to last much longer than people thought. Like, people, I don't know if you were like me, but in the first one, you're like, oh, I'll stay home for 2 weeks. Fine. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, actually, I think this might go for like a year or longer. And so I was glad that early on I thought of that idea of the weekly thing just because I think I would have felt really disconnected. from the world and from especially the music world without it. But what's been fun about the guests is that a lot of them are people we've met on the road that I've actually done shows with in the past, and so you're kind of reliving these memories of touring. And I don't know, yeah, that was a huge part of what made this past year pretty more bearable. You know what I mean? Was having that connection, and then watching people in the chat. That's something I didn't expect. Is people come pretty much. There's a core group of people that come pretty much every week, and they're in there chatting in the YouTube chat about like, oh, I'm getting dental work next week. Oh, how'd that checkup go? And they're all talking to each other, and they've gotten to know each other online, and that's something that I think we can hopefully keep going after the pandemic. Is this sometimes online forums are actually uniquely cool in that they allow people from different places to experience the same thing at the same time. So I'll have people from England and India and the US and France and Brazil talking to each other all at the same time. And I think that's kind of special in a different way. It's not the same as live music. So, I mean, I obviously miss doing that. But in the meantime, this has provided like a whole different avenue that I would never have thought to explore.
Right? It's one of the plus sides here
Mhm.
of I don't know. I feel weird saying a plus side of the pandemic, but maybe give it a little like, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. The community that you've built up during this time, like that's incredible.
When I think a lot of hard times create new things that end up being valuable. Like, I mean, wheelchair basketball came out of veterans um, who were injured in wars wanting to have a recreational activity, right? And so then obviously that's terrible and like really difficult. But then now, little kids with disabilities grow up being able to play wheelchair basketball. So, like, I think a lot of things that start out as initially just responding to something really difficult or undesirable still can turn into something positive that goes forward with us. And I don't know, I think that's probably pretty common. And we just don't always live through it. So we don't see it happening. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. And so you have guests booked through the end of December. I love that.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. I wasn't sure how it would go. I texted like half of my phone, so I got through the letter M. I haven't even actually gone beyond the letter M yet for guests. But I texted all the musicians I knew and I said, if you want to sign up, here's the link and pick a week, and any week is fine with me. And so, yeah, it booked up way faster than I expected. So I stopped asking people for a while, but then gradually I'm starting to put feelers out again to keep going. And as long as there's interest, I mean, it waxes and wanes depending on the season too, I think. But as long as there's interest, I want to keep them going because, again, as I said, I don't think they compare to live shows or that they need to compare. It's more like a radio show or like some kind of talk show. Is sort of the vibe that it ended up taking on. But I think that's fun because I've never had a reason to interview people before, and I just get a kick out of it. I think it's. I mean, you probably like it like on radio, right? For talking to new people every week. I think it's just a really fun thing to do.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. So you're liking that
Yeah,
host duty.
yeah, I was surprised. I wasn't sure what I would think, but I genuinely enjoy it. So yeah, it's fun.
That's good. Well, let's see. You have your Sunday sessions. Oh my gosh, you're writing a book, aren't you?
Yes,
Oh
yes.
goodness.
Yeah, I know it's a little overwhelming. But it's so I decided a couple of years ago, like people after speeches, a lot of because I do a lot of public speaking on disability and accessibility in music and different perspectives on disability, and so after I would speak, a lot of people would be like, "You really need to write a book so that you can share this with a wider audience." And I wanted to, but it's really hard to find time. And so another silver lining of this last year for me was like, okay, well, this is like you could not have handed on a silver platter like more time. Basically, we're just home, like definitely not traveling. And so I wrote up the outline I've got the first few chapters. I'm working on a book proposal now because apparently I'm learning as I go, and apparently publishers like to actually have you committed before the book is done pretty often. So you kind of want to give them a full outline of the whole book. So I'm working on that full outline now. It's like pretty fleshed out. And then in the summer, I'm just planning to write. I mean, besides these shows, the weekly shows, I'm going to keep doing those. But I'm not going to do other events this summer at all. It was hard. I thought I wasn't going to do other events this year, but it actually was extremely busy. Like, everybody went virtual college campuses. And so a lot of speaking events came up, which was cool. And I'm grateful for that because that's another source of income and stuff. But it was definitely not as chill of a year as one would have suspected, you know? So this summer, I'm going to really dedicate time to just writing. And it's fun. It's going to be I'm hoping that it'll be fun to read, kind of a combo of like childhood growing up with a disability, but then um, in between the chapters, there's going to be from the tiny desk on touring and stuff. And so kind of going between those two um, topics, and hopefully that'll kind of keep different readers interested for different reasons, you know. Um, some people probably for music and some for the disability, right? So it'll be kind of both things in one book, hopefully.
Right. Wow. Well, that's very ambitious and very exciting. Congrats on, taking that project on.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's like I love performing and writing music and stuff, but this really feels like the next. I don't know. You get that itch where you're like, this is really what I want to. This is the next thing I definitely want to have out in the world. So hopefully, yeah. So far, it's going all right. And I have that. The cool thing about the Patreon team is I created Patreon to kind of give us a cushion for income, but what it turned in, and so not wasn't the only reason. It's to connect with the people who support your music. But what's been really cool about the Patreon team is once a month I send them an excerpt from something I have written for the book, and so I can kind of get their feedback and they can kind of see where it's going, you know. But their encouragement has been really helpful because I think it would be really lonely not having any. I'm sure most writers probably feel really alone, but I've been having this little built-in like support network team of like people who are like, I can't wait to read it, which is really helpful because otherwise you could feel like you're banging your head against a wall probably writing a book.
I'm sure. Well, how fun. That's you have such a great it sounds like a couple pockets of community that you have going on.
Yeah.
Patreon, your YouTube, Sunday sessions as well. That's so exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, those two things have been really sustaining us this year, emotionally and just kind of creatively. And so that's been really, really cool. I mean, obviously, this year was not a piece of cake by any means, but I think having a couple of things that really felt positive and like community have been really cool. So I think that's, if I had any advice for anyone, it would just be find something to join online that you like kind of connect with regularly because otherwise it can get kind of monotonous or whatever. To have something to look forward to is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about some of your speaking engagements. So you said you've been pretty busy with that. What and with via Zoom, you can probably so many more opportunities I'm sure are available because you don't have to travel, which is well, I kind of like traveling for things, but it's kind of nice when you don't have to as
Well,
well.
I love both. It is going to be really weird when you don't just have to like roll across the room and like turn on your computer and you're like, wait, I have to drive 4 hours and set up all my gear. This is crazy. So it's going to be a big shift back to real life shows, but the online things, I've been doing a lot of speaking. Part of it is about disability as a form of diversity rather than talking about it in negative, like only medical terms. Because I think a lot of people with disabilities, myself included, kind of just see it as a part of your identity, like almost like a culture more than a as an impairment, you know. So kind of talking about how we can talk about disability differently. But the exciting one is for me is we've been talking a lot about accessibility in the arts and representation of disabled people in the music industry. Like, I think people often just don't think to like seek out disabled artists. Like, I mean, music writers or like curators or whatever, like, aren't like it's because we don't talk about it as a form of diversity. They're not thinking like, oh, I have to represent this group, even though we're a really large minority. And so like kind of pulling together other disabled artists. I was on a few really cool panels. One was for Folk Alliance International, and then one was for the Grammys, the Recording Academy. So I had a panel and just talking about the importance of including disability as like if you're thinking to make your music representative, then you have to make your places accessible for disabled artists to perform and for disabled people to go see the shows. But then beyond that, like who are you writing about? Whose albums are you reviewing? You know, that kind of stuff. If you never include disability in that, then we're getting kind of like just left out of the discussion in a way that's not really okay for any minority, but we don't see disability as like a cultural group worth covering yet. So that's kind of starting to change, though, I think, is what I'm trying to say, is those panels don't solve the problem, but they at least are highlighting the issue where it's really interesting as a person with a disability who tours a lot or did or will, you know, um, it's one of those things where these problems seem really obvious to me, but a lot of the people who listen to the panels or who even lead the panels are like, wow, I've never thought of this stuff before. So there is a big gap in like where general society is and where the disabled musicians are. So trying to bridge that gap to kind of move everything forward is what those speaking engagements have been about. And I'm starting to see change. I think I would like it to move faster, but it is happening, which is cool. So we're kind of at this turning point, I think. Um, Television and movies have started talking about disability representation a little sooner than the music industry, I think. And so it's all kind of happening now, but the television and movies are a little ahead of the game than where we are right now, I think,
Hmm.
personally. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, I'm curious.
I, I first of all, thank you for being out there and being an advocate. That's beautiful, and I know you're where you stand with it. That's I mean, you bring up so many good points, and you're right. It's not anything that people talk about, and or think about. I do remember hearing one of our KFI mini culture pieces on you where you were
Yep.
talking about how some of the venues that you go to aren't wheelchair accessible, which I found the whole piece. I mean, it was a great piece on you, and I was kind of like, "Are you kidding me? How does that happen?
Yeah.
How?" I'm so sorry. Like I just find that appalling that you're coming to perform
Yep.
and the place is not accessible, and that's one more thing, on top of all the things you need to bring to a gig and get ready for. You also have to
Yeah.
think, hey, I am in a wheelchair. How am I able to get in? How am I going to get on the stage, or how do I get off the stage? How do I get into your building? Like
Yeah.
that's so many things to think about. And I was also thinking about this I love the Lifetime and Christmas Hallmark movies.
Yes.
And Lifetime this past year had a great movie, and the main character was in a wheelchair, and it wasn't like, oh, how'd you get in a wheelchair? It was just, this is our main character. She's in a wheelchair. And it just like went on. She was the lead. I thought it was I thought it was a fun story because I love those cheesy stories. But
Yes.
so yes, I do see a little bit more progress, I guess. I'm sure there are other examples. I'm guessing you didn't catch that Lifetime movie.
I know we don't have a TV, so I am pretty much the worst person to ask about that kind of stuff. Yes.
But I really like them. I think I watched it twice because I was also at home during this time, and I thought it was a
Yes.
cute story, and I just really supported that they represented somebody like that, and it wasn't, oh, let's talk about. And yes, there's definitely places to talk about.
But it doesn't have to be like 100%. Like, all the songs I write, aren't about disability. A few of them
Right.
are, but most of them aren't actually, you know?
Yeah. So I'll send you the link. No,
Yeah, I know. I'm like, now I gotta watch it. Do you remember what it's called?
I don't. She was a writer, and she always returned to this hotel every Christmas, and of course, like the owner's son was around, and he was a widow, and
So then, of course, they fell in love, right? Well, don't give it away, but I
Oh,
mean,
I know. Oh,
90%
yeah,
chance that's what happens, right? Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. But you're right, and it's how do we get these? How do we get more venues to think about these things, and even people who are in wheelchairs or have other disabilities into places? Like, what do we need to do as a community? Like, what can I do to help in that area?
Well, yeah, that's one thing I've been trying to do on my Sunday shows is make sure I represent some disabled artists. So the last few weeks, I had a lady named Ruth Patterson from the UK, and then another guy named James Holt. And Ruth uses a wheelchair because of a chronic illness she has, and James was born deaf, so he uses hearing aids. And just kind of like I'm trying my best to when people mention other disabled artists to like actually connect with them. And then whenever I get a chance, when people are like, "Oh, can you do this event or whatever?" and I say, "Well, I can't, but here's a list of other people." I just really try to like push, because they're all really amazing musicians. Like Ruth and James are both like phenomenal, and they happen to also be disabled. So like anything we can do to like push them with other artists that we also think are good, like just including them in the mix basically is like my goal now as a musician, like trying to do more shows with other disabled artists, or like just trying to, if you're name dropping people, include some disabled people in the list of like what music are you enjoying, or you know what I mean, just because there are a lot of really talented artists that I didn't know about until a couple of years ago when I started thinking like I can't be the only person with a wheelchair playing shows, which I'm not. I mean, it turns out I'm not, but it took me a while to make those connections and find them. So I think people in venues who are booking shows could be doing research in their area, right? Just to say, are there any artists that I could be reaching out to, or like music writers and all those things. Like NPR Music. I'm really grateful that they gave me my start, obviously, like nationally. So they weren't like afraid to talk about the topic of disability. But I personally think like places like that could do more coverage, just like kind of as a matter of fact. Because if we are indeed a quarter of the population in the U.S. has some form of disability, that's a pretty large number, So just trying to get a little more representative in general, just on a but like picking the ones that you like. Obviously, you shouldn't promote music you don't resonate with or like, but I think there's a lot out there. So just kind of uncovering it is my goal right now.
Okay, so tune in every week to
But
the
there's
Sunday
other
session.
places, of course, yes. But yeah, just trying to find those people and like see, yeah, just kind of learn what they're doing has been really fun, and hopefully those people can connect us to other people. You know what I mean? And kind of grow that network.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Okay. Give me a lot to think about, and I like it.
Okay, good. Sweet. Well, I'm glad you're not like, oh no, this is terrible. So,
No, no. Wow. Anything else going on with you? I mean, you're very busy for quarantine. You're a busy person.
yeah, this year was way busier than I ever imagined that it would be. No, I mean, besides that, I'm just trying to finish the rough draft of the book, and once that's done, I think I'll start probably booking some shows. But it's not gonna be for a while because I just don't. It's easy to be like, oh, well, when you're working on a big project, you're like, I think I need to suddenly clean out my closet and like fold all my clothes and trying to like plan tours at the same time. I just know I wouldn't have enough mental energy to write and like book all my own gigs or whatever. So I'm going to take some time off, but I'm looking forward to getting back out like when it makes sense to do that, you know? So because I love traveling and I do miss seeing other parts of the country for sure. That's something I really enjoyed a lot. So we'll be back out eventually. I mean, I think this summer we're gonna go to a little cabin in the UP, and that'll be like the farthest away we've been from home since last March or whatever. So I mean, it's been a weird year that way. Stationary for sure.
Right. For sure. Well, that sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, everyone tune in weekly to the Sunday sessions on YouTube and get on the chat. And it
Yeah.
is like a fun show. And we are actually, thank you so much, Gaelynn Lea, for you're gonna let me play a couple of your performances from your weekly show. So thank you so much. I'm so glad we can share that here on MSP Sound. And
Hey.
very excited to hear that. Some live music. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I hope I get to see you in person sometime, maybe in a year.
Yeah, I know.
Trying to think when things will be like
more flexible. Yeah.
yeah.
I bet within the year. I bet within the year that'll happen. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll see you sometime. But I appreciate you having me on to talk about stuff and yeah, I'm looking forward to like keeping in touch with you down the road.
And I will definitely send you the link to what that movie was. I will look.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I'm like, now I really want to know. But I don't know. Yeah. No, that's cool. I like cheesy, cute things. Pretty much into like animated movies, cheesy, cute movies, and documentaries. Those are my three categories. So that'll be good.
Okay, good. I like that. Sounds like right in your wheelhouse.
Yep, it does. It does. Cool. Well, thank you. And stay safe and take care of yourself.
You too. Thanks.